Welcome everyone. In today's video, I'm going to talk about Kubernetes. We're going to spend half the video on architecture and half on the demo. So if you're pretty new to Kubernetes, this would be good for you. If you're advanced, this may be just a refresher for basics. So let's jump in to what we're going to talk about. So I'm going to cover terminology. I'm going to cover the architecture and features of Kubernetes, and then the last half, we're going to go and jump into a demo of deploying an app. And then I'll give you the references I used in the video in the description. So why Kubernetes and what problem does it solve? I linked up a really good YouTube talk about Netflix and when they switched over to microservices. They were one of the first larger organizations to move to microservices. And if you're not familiar with microservices, they're basically splitting up web servers from one large monolithic instance to several mini instances. If you have performance problems, then it's really hard to boost that if you have one instance because everything is going to one place. With microservices, they're spread out all over. You can have multiple geographies and you spread the load. So that's what microservices are. And what Kubernetes does, or microservices are held in different containers, which I'll bring up here in a minute. But what Kubernetes does is it will orchestrate, or it'll help you manage thousands of Docker containers and keep them in sync. And that way it's all automated. You don't have to do this manually because it would not be possible to do on its own. So Google built this several years back, and then they solved all the problems, and then they did their benevolence and open sourced it to the community, and it's been growing in the community ever since. So let's talk about a little terminology just to cover the basics. First is, what is a container? So a container is another layer on top of virtual machine. So if you're familiar with virtual machine, that is, you have first layer is bare metal, second layer is virtual machine, and third layer is a container. And a container takes the OS libraries and creates another runtime environment. So you could have several apps running on a virtual machine, or even a bare metal, but it basically gives you a lot more capabilities out of a single server, giving you more dense infrastructure. And then a pod is what Kubernetes creates to spread containers or load balance the containers. It also creates the networking and the storage to share among them. So you could have multiple containers to a pod or a single container to a pod, depend on how you deploy it. Okay, some of the features to be aware, these are just things that you should be familiar with if you're gonna be an administrator of Kubernetes. First is RBAC. This was introduced a few versions back. Before it was pretty simple security. Now they've really increased the security, and this is role-based access. I won't get too much into detail, but you are going to need to get familiar with this. The other one is they have their own internal DNS. Now, when you have separate containers, they need to talk to each other. It handles and manages all that for you, which is really nice, including the networking. So it gives an internal network, and it allows you to communicate internally by default. If you want to set up external access, I will show you in this video, you set up through the proxy or the load balancer to gain external access. And the last one is called Helm. This is prepackaged. Think of it as like apt for Linux. It's a way to download and manage packages within Kubernetes. Next, we have what it takes to set up a Kubernetes cluster. And at minimum, you need one master server and 2 nodes. And then you can scale up from there depending on the workload. So if you need more masters, you have to go in odd numbers. So that would be 1, 3, 5, etc. And the nodes, you can scale those up as high as you need them to go. Okay, as far as deployment, you can deploy this in the cloud. In this demo, I'll show you GKE, Google Kubernetes Engine, and you can also do this on Amazon. It's just not as automatic because Google has developed that within their cloud system, but you can do it. And then also you can do this on premise or your private cloud. Some of the tools out there are called Kops, kubeadm, and kubespray. They have automated a lot of the deployment for you to make it much more easy. If you're more advanced and you want to get into the specifics, there is a good GitHub out there called Kubernetes the Hard Way by Kelsey Hightower. He's a good advocate of Kubernetes. Okay, so let's get a little bit into the demo here. Instead of doing a live demo, I've just taken some screenshots to save time on loading and in case I had to do any debugging. So let's take a look here. First step is go to Google console.cloud.google.com, and then type in GKE, and this will bring you to create a Kubernetes cluster. If for home use, they give you $100 of credits, and this will just go towards your free credits. After that, then there's going to be cost. So go ahead and go create cluster. The next step is to pick out the type of cluster, and this one I just picked standard, but as you can see, you have more options such as CPU, memory, GPU, etc. Then go ahead, it'll take a few minutes to run. There's a lot going on in the background that's very beneficial that you don't see, and then it'll give you the option to connect to the Google CLI. So here's the Google CLI where you can connect right in your browser. It gives you an option to set up your kube control config. So you'll want to do that once you get connected. So here it is. So why don't I jump on over and we're going to run some example. We're going to run an example deployment of an nginx server, which is basically just a web proxy server, to show you how it works. Yeah, first thing what we're going to do now is check the health of the cluster. So you can do a kubectl get nodes, and this will tell you which ones are running. And you can also do a kubectl cluster info. This will give you more information about the nodes. So as you can see, it's up and running. So let's go ahead and deploy a test application. Now, if you're doing this on your own, you can pull from your own private Docker registry, which is basically a repository of your own applications, and you can specify the settings inside a YAML file. Okay, so then we have already deployed an nginx instance. So if you do a get pods, it'll show you where it is running, and you can see which node it's running on. Another common command is describe pod, and then select the pod that you just queried. This will give you a lot of information about the pod if you're troubleshooting, if you're having errors bringing it up. So it'll give you a lot more information here. Okay, next command we're going to run is we're going to change it to 2 replicas. This will basically duplicate it to another pod for redundancy. Get pods again. You can see that there is now 2 of the instances running. Okay, next command, what we're going to do is expose this externally via the load balancer. This will allow us to get to it externally. By default, it only is set up internally. So you can see the external ports here, and this is pending. It takes a minute to run, and you'll get an IP address there. Okay, now you can see there is an external IP, so let's go ahead and test it out. Put this in your browser, and there it is. Welcome to nginx. And just to prove that it did work, what we're going to do is reverse and delete the instance. So let's go ahead and undeploy it. Okay, and then just rerun it, and it's no longer available. So that's it for this short demo. Hopefully you found some useful. If you're a beginner or you're just trying to navigate around, there are some great resources here for you that I think are helpful. So the nginx example, I'll link this up, is from GitHub. There's also a cheat sheet with all the basic commands, which is really helpful. If you're looking for more information and help, there's a Slack channel for Kubernetes. I'll link that one up as well. And then lastly, there's a really good children's guide that I came across on the internet that is really interesting way of analogy of describing what Kubernetes is and how it works. I hope you enjoyed this video. Comment if you have your experiences with Kubernetes, maybe some helpful tips, or if you have any questions. Thanks for watching. See you next time.